Every human desire is infinite. The physical resources required to fulfill them, metal, water, and arable land, are strictly finite. Every choice exacts a toll. We call this the opportunity cost. It is the mathematical certainty that selecting one option requires sacrificing the value of the next best alternative. Because the inputs of production, land, labor, and capital are limited, every society must choose precisely how to allocate its productive potential. This graph is the production possibilities curve. It maps the maximum theoretical output combinations a nation can achieve when deciding between two competing goods. Any coordinate resting directly on the line represents total efficiency, where all national resources are fully employed. Points inside the boundary indicate systemic underutilization, like mass unemployment. Points beyond the curve are impossible to reach under current technological limits. A straight line frontier indicates constant opportunity costs. The resources required to produce both goods are highly adaptable, meaning you trade one for the other at a fixed, unchanging rate. A bowed-out, concave frontier illustrates the law of increasing opportunity costs. Because resources are often specialized, a software engineer cannot easily build a tractor. Producing more of one good forces you to sacrifice increasingly larger amounts of the other. Before an economy can attempt to grow, scarcity forces it to define these limits and trade-offs. Consider a common economic myth. A vandal throws a brick through a bakery window. Some argue this act stimulates the economy by forcing the owner to pay for repairs. The logic follows the immediate transaction. The baker pays a glazier $100 for a new pane of glass. The glazier then takes that $100 and spends it at other shops, circulating currency. This line of reasoning is known as the broken window fallacy. To determine if this destruction actually creates wealth, we have to account for more than just the money we can see. What is seen is the transaction with the glazier. What remains unseen is the opportunity cost. The baker was planning to spend that $100 on a new suit. Had the window remained intact, the baker would possess both a functional window and a suit. Now they're left with only a repaired window. We can now see that destructive events do not create net wealth. They simply redirect scarce resources away from productive new investments toward basic maintenance. While a nation cannot physically produce goods beyond its domestic production possibilities curve, it can consume beyond those limits through international trade. Consider a fixed period scenario comparing two nations, the United States and Germany, both producing capital goods and consumer goods. It is a common instinct to look at absolute advantage, which nation produces the most. However, global trade operates on a different principle, the calculation of the lowest opportunity cost. By dividing foregone by gained production, we calculate the fractional opportunity cost for each good. This reveals Germany sacrifices less for consumer goods, while the US sacrifices less for capital goods. These lower opportunity costs dictate the path of specialization. To benefit from specialization, both nations must agree on an exchange rate, known as the terms of trade. For trade to be mutually beneficial, this rate must fall exactly between their individual opportunity costs. Comparative advantage turns international trade into a cooperative mathematical mechanism that expands consumption limits for everyone. Policymakers evaluate the health of this macroeconomic machine using three primary metrics: output growth, stable employment, and price stability. National output is measured using gross domestic product, or GDP. It represents the total market value of all final goods and services produced during a single year. This equation represents the expenditures approach, measuring total final spending. The variables map every sector. C is household consumption, I is business investment, G covers government spending, and X sub N represents net exports, exports minus imports. Accuracy requires very strict exclusions. The calculation omits intermediate inputs, financial asset transfers, and the sale of used goods. By measuring only final new production, economists prevent double counting and establish a standardized baseline. Evaluating national output requires distinguishing between nominal figures, which show printed face value, and real values, which show actual purchasing power. A nominal wage increase yields no actual benefit if general price levels rise faster than the raise itself. The numerical value on your paycheck goes up, but the amount of goods you acquire drops. Unexpected inflation creates a hidden redistribution of wealth. It punishes lenders repaid in depreciated currency, while rewarding borrowers who pay off debts using dollars worth less than when first borrowed. Economists track these price fluctuations over time using statistical tools like the Consumer Price Index and the GDP deflator. This formula calculates real GDP. By dividing the nominal output by the GDP deflator, economists strip away the distortion of inflation to reveal the true output. Correcting for inflation prevents the illusion of growth from hiding the steady erosion of economic wealth. The threat of inflation is directly connected to the total money supply circulating within an economy. This equation is the quantity theory of money, mapping the relationship between money supply and national price levels. If velocity and real output remain stable, rapidly expanding the money supply directly drives a proportional increase in aggregate prices. The Federal Reserve manipulates liquidity using three main tools: the reserve requirement, the discount rate, and open market operations. When the central bank injects money into the system, the supply curve shifts right. This lowers nominal interest rates, making borrowing cheaper to encourage private business investment. Central banks walk a tightrope, using monetary expansion to stimulate investment while avoiding the tipping point that triggers runaway inflation. When an economy falls into a deep recession, a government may deploy expansionary fiscal stimulus to force a recovery. If the government lacks the tax revenue to cover this spending, it must borrow massive sums from the private loanable funds market. This creates the crowding out effect. By absorbing billions of dollars to fund its stimulus, the government drives up the aggregate demand for loanable funds. This surge in demand pushes up real interest rates. This makes it expensive for private businesses to borrow for new equipment and factories. Because this mechanism makes private investment less affordable, deficit-funded stimulus can self-defeat by trading away long-term private sector growth for short-term government spending. Domestic interest rates also impact the global stage. When the Federal Reserve pushes interest rates high, international investors rush to capitalize on the higher returns. These investors cannot purchase U.S. financial assets using foreign currency. They must first acquire U.S. dollars. The shift in demand for the U.S. dollar causes the currency to rapidly appreciate in value. A strong currency acts as a dual-edged sword. For domestic consumers, it increases purchasing power, making imported foreign goods cheaper. However, a strong dollar simultaneously makes American exports prohibitively expensive for the rest of the world, leading to a collapse in export volumes. The macroeconomic machine is a sensitive loop. Every domestic policy choice regarding scarcity, debt, or the money supply triggers an unavoidable global ripple effect.